This week on the podcast, we get into the defamation lawsuit filed by a wedding photographer against former clients who defamed her, resulting in a whopping $1 million verdict. We do that with our special guest, the attorney for that wedding photographer, Dave Wishnew. Coming right up.
This is the Wedding Industry Law Podcast, a podcast dedicated to wedding professionals that are just trying to keep it legal. And now, your host, Rob Shank.
Hey out there, welcome back to the podcast. We have a very interesting episode. We're going to be talking all about the law of defamation by way of a specific case study, that being a defamation case by a wedding photographer in the great state of Texas, the Lone Star State, resulting in, they only do things big in Texas, but resulting in a $1 million verdict on behalf of that wedding photographer. But before we get into that, I would super duper like it if you could like and subscribe to this podcast wherever you get your podcasts from. But more importantly, please mosey on over to my YouTube channel. Like and subscribe to that channel. I'm really trying to get to 1,000 subscribers. I know that doesn't sound like very many subscribers, but maybe you could be one of them. I would really like that for the purposes of going live with my YouTube account. I can't do that until I get 1,000 subscribers. Maybe you'll be one of them. I would greatly appreciate it, especially if you are enjoying the content. And with that, let's get into this episode. So we're going to be talking all about the Andrea Polito case. Andrea Polito was a very prominent wedding photographer in the great state of Texas, wedding photographer, event photographer, and one day she signed a contract with Neely and Andrew Moldovan, okay? Did the wedding, and then afterwards, there was some type of brouhaha about what the contract actually specified and what was explained to the Moldovans about the cost of a wedding album, a $125 wedding album. And according to the Moldovans at that time, their photographs were being held hostage if they did not pay, quote unquote, an extra amount for a specific album cover to the photo album, right? And that is the genesis of where we get to fast forward 3 years later and you get to a $1 million verdict. I'm just going to leave it at that for right now, because what I want to do is have the attorney for Andrea Polito come on to the podcast and talk to us about the facts of the case, the laws of defamation in the state of Texas, and how the facts of this case resulted in that verdict, and maybe some takeaways that all of you guys out there in wedding industry law land can take away to protect yourselves, or maybe file a lawsuit yourself. Who knows? But we're going to have Dave Wishnew on the episode, and let me tell you a little bit about Dave. Dave Wishnew is a trial lawyer and business counselor that protects and pursues his clients' interests. Dave's diverse litigation practice focuses on complex commercial, employment, and intellectual property litigation in state and federal courts and administrative forums all over Texas and across the country. Dave's clients include individuals and businesses of all types and sizes, mostly based in Texas or with operations in other states, including Fortune 500 companies, professional athletes, doctors and executives, local breweries, and of course, don't forget, wedding photographers. Dave sent me before this episode the PowerPoint to his closing argument, and let me just say, I can just tell by the PowerPoint that he is a tremendous trial lawyer. He has a way of at least constructing these slides, and we'll get into it a little bit later, but they're pretty damaging to the defense, as the results can show for that. But we are so happy to have him on today. Dave, welcome to the show.
Glad to be here.
Awesome. Well, you know, the first several episodes of this podcast, I was by my lonesome, just talking about straight law, and then I've slowly started to have more guests. And one of the first guests I thought of to have on was you, because of this, specifically because of this case. We won't bore everybody with kind of the basic law of defamation. If anybody's interested in the basic questions of what constitutes defamation, you know, what are the nuances of that law, I would recommend you listen to the last week's episode. So I have Dave on here right now just to literally just go into, let's get into the meat and potatoes of this case, what makes this case special, why he took it, and all that kind of stuff. So let's start with the basics. Dave, can you tell us who Andrea Polito is, and kind of the circumstances of the disputed issue in this case that actually led to the defamatory statement?
Absolutely. Andrea Polito's was a single mom at the time that built a business from the ground up, became one of the most successful wedding photographers in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, had a studio, employees, company photographers, did about 75 weddings a year. And unfortunately, some clients that were self-motivated, as I'll talk to you about, for other reasons, decided to take the house that she had built for so many years and burn it down. You know, Andrea's clients, they wanted their pictures early. They wanted their pictures before the set time, which in the documents she had given them that they would receive them. It was always, give me the pictures, give me the pictures. And when they didn't get them, and when her office, Andrea's office, sent the form that she sends to all of her clients that she'd done for every wedding, because she builds an album into your budget. In this case, the Moldavans, the clients, had a stated budget of $4,500 to $5,500. Andrea set a budget of $4,200 and said, after your wedding, you have to order an album cover that she orders from Italy. Styles change, taste change in the 2 years that happens. She builds the price, you know, into that budget to always come in under budget, which she did. When the Moldavans got their order form and they said, wait, we have to pay extra money for the cover, which again had been told to them, you know, 18 months prior, they flipped out and saying, why are we paying for this undisclosed fee? And they pitched their story to all the news stations in town, and NBC bid. And using the videographer's video, they did a story that said, holding pictures hostage for an undisclosed fee. That story went viral, and Andrea never booked another wedding again, got hate mail from across the world, and came into my office one day and had been referred by a friend and asked for help. And that's how it all started.
So and that's what's so crazy about this. So if I understand correctly, the images couldn't be provided by Miss Polito until an album was secured. Like they decided on the images, it came in from Italy, all that kind of stuff. But literally, it required them under the contract to pay an extra $125 to get the album so they can get their images, right? So
a little bit different in that.
But at the end of the day, it was literally $125.
$125 to $250, depending on the cover they selected. They also had to select the images that they wanted in it. And it was all stated in, like, you know, Q&A forms and everything that were provided to them.
Right.
But what it wasn't about, you know, they went on TV and were sympathetic because they said it's not about the money, it's about the principle. But it was about the money, you see, because the wife is a blogger, still is a blogger. And I think collectively through all of her social media had well over 100,000 followers at the time. What I tell the jury and what I tell you now is driving traffic to one's blog means more blog money, right? And they were so thrilled to burn her business down. The text messages, the emails, the comments on social media, they did everything they could to incite, you know, a riot. They wanted to build an audience, you know, taking them while NBC's in the room filming them, posting, wait till you see it. And the pure venom and maliciousness that they were wanting to do it, and the joy in which they were having with with watching a woman's business be taken down. It was sick. It was sick.
Can you kind of I understand from the facts of the case that there were, I mean, several comments that could be actionable, but what were some of the behavior and literally what were some of the statements that you can recall that were kind of at the forefront of this is, you know, a case that I want to move forward with, like maybe a particular blog post or an email or whatever? What was some of that language that was actionable in your opinion?
Well, it was, I would say the story itself, pitching the story itself that said that, you know, Andrea was holding their pictures hostage for an undisclosed fee. That right there is defamatory, because it just wasn't true. And in fact, Andrea had offered to give the cover for free and give them the picture. She just fill out the form. And so they still got their pictures earlier than the time that Andrea said in the contract, because she spends time on each picture detailing them and everything. But other statements that were defamatory is then it was what I told the jury was big lies and small lies, right? The big lies, she was taking something from them for an undisclosed fee. The small lies, 22 other brides had come forward and provided this. And this is post. When I put her under oath, she couldn't name 2 brides, right? You talk about that. She sent 2 company photographers to do our bridal shower, and that as if it was Andrea was misleading them, and I forget the specific statement, but it was right there in the documents they signed. They knew they could have paid for Andrea, or they could have paid for one of her photographers. It's right there. Right. So it was a series of these types of, she charged me $7,000 and I didn't do this, or whatever the price was. And it was, well, actually she charged you the price that was stated in the contract, which was $4,500 or whatever the numbers were. It was everything. There were all these exaggerations and untruths and falsities that collected together destroyed a reputation that had been built over 12 plus years.
And so Miss Polito comes into your office. She's sitting there. What made you, Dave Wishnew, like you're sitting there? You get 15 calls a day about whatever and whatever. Why did you take this particular case? Like, what made this case special for you?
That is a good question, because I'd never taken a plaintiff defamation case before. The defamation cases are the hardest cases to take. You as a lawyer, as well, right? It's the hardest case to make. It's the hardest case to keep. Even if you get a verdict, it's the hardest one to keep on appeal, especially in Texas. And so, there's an old joke amongst lawyers that I've never met a defamation case that I liked. And the reason is because they're so difficult. But this one, look, why I went to law school. I like to fight the good fight. I like to be on the right side of things, plaintiff or defense. I want to believe in what I'm fighting for. And I had a person in my office who sobbing, whose whole life that she had built, the things that we want to teach our kids to do is how you build a business from nothing with a camera and a dream, building it into one of the most successful in North Texas. And her whole world had come apart. And she asked me for help. And you know what? And I just decided that I was going to help her, and that I could be her, I could be her sword.
That's and that like a movie. It's like a movie. So Dave, like, she's sitting there, you've decided to take the case because you're a wonderful person. And, but you mentioned that defamation cases are hard to win. And the joke is that there are no good ones. What separates defamation from, say, any other intentional tort like assault or battery, or a breach of contract case? Like, why is defamation in a special category in terms of being difficult?
Sure. Because when we talk of defamation, you're talking about the spoken or written word that is causing damage to another. It is something that I put in print, something that I said has caused you monetary harm. I mean, and you think about that, just the words we say, how to prove the damage that it's caused. And I think that is particularly why courts have, when you get big jury verdicts in this area, why courts have often reversed it, because connecting, the causation, as we'd say, but connecting the dots between the spoken written word and the actual economic, the lost profits, the devaluation of a business is so difficult, and is often requires, all as much circumstantial evidence, as you can to tie that together. It just is very difficult case. And I know courts in Texas have never seemed to like them. Even when you get the big verdict, to keep them on appeal, because even if you get the verdict, they'll be reversed for whatever reason. So it's just a difficult type of case.
Yeah, I completely get that. So what separated then this particular defamation case from another one? So in other words, what I guess is it accurate to say that the reason why you, aside from your skills, were successful in this is because the defamation and the defamatory behavior, if you will, was so like it was so egregious and so systematic. Like, I mean, there was evidence for it. Is that fair to say?
I think yes. It was also in that she came to me after that first NBC story went viral, right? Where everybody, just like our verdict 2.5 years later, everybody was talking about it. She couldn't leave her house. She was afraid to pick up her kid at school. And it was no question. She was the most popular, or one of the most popular wedding photographers one day, and the next day she would never book another wedding. So it was, her business fell off a cliff, right? There was no question as to what the cause was. And so that was one of the reasons. I mean, it was, there wasn't, any question about, was her business in decline? Was it this other reason? Was it the economy? I mean, she was doing great. And then two people set out to burn her down. And this particular one was, like what I told the jury, I tried this case on the malice of the defendants. The venom in which they attacked her, the joy in which they had watching her house be burned down. That is what fueled me, was their hatred for her for no reason. Because up until they didn't get their pictures, they loved everything she did. Every one of their posts was, "We love you. This is the most fantastic. Everything is great." And then when they saw some room for self-promotion and self-gain at the expense of Andrea, they took it, and it was sick. And in this case, so we got some vindication.
And you bring up a couple good points there. And Dave was kind enough to share with me some of the insight into his closing arguments, which in a trial is essentially kind of like an analysis and a summary of the evidence, and you try to make your last pitch to the jury. This is how we see the facts that came into evidence. This is why you should find this way. And so there's two things with that. Number one, Dave did a very good job of, in a trial, oftentimes you want to make it about the defense's conduct as opposed to the plaintiff. And he went through and really systematically, from deposition statements to the text message and the emails showing the defendant was really egregious. But to get back to what he was saying in terms of defamation cases are difficult from a factual standpoint to say this was a defamatory statement, but they're even more difficult in the sense of proving damages. Like how have you been affected? He does an excellent job in that sense by showing on like a timeline the date of the defamatory comments, or the NBC story really, and which occurred in January, which is a booking season. And you see the history of Miss Polito's bookings in the years before, and then it's completely not the same. So he did a good job of literally connecting the NBC story and the defamation to the damages that Miss Polito had incurred. So that was a really good job in terms of like those are the things that make defamation cases hard, but that's what makes this case special. Because the evidence was there for both the egregious behavior and the damages. So let me ask this, man, like, did they ever apologize? Was there ever any remorse after the verdict, after the award?
I can't speak to any private apologies they did or remorse they showed without Andrea and me, but never to Andrea, never to me. In fact, they didn't. We tried that case over a week, and the jury was out deliberating. Well, what we thought was a few 2.5 hours, but it turns out they decided very quickly. They just went to get lunch and then they came back. But the Moldavans didn't even stay to hear the verdict read. They left, and when they left before the verdict came out, they weren't there. And while it's since been resolved in a confidential way, I'd say that I can't get into numbers. Let's just say that we came out to make to vindicate Andrea's name and to make her whole, and I think we did as close to that as you can.
Understood. So well, that was a question. I'm not going to get into collection, and let's set this case aside for a second. Okay, not talking about the Polito case, but in a typical defamation case. Well, let me back up then. When one of the reasons why you see when you're driving down the interstate billboards for motor vehicle attorney and all this kind of stuff is because when you have a motor vehicle wreck and you're injured and you have a claim, those cases are quote unquote easier to collect on because there's an insurance policy behind them. In other words, there's incentive for an attorney to say, yeah, I'll represent you for your car wreck because at the end of the day, Allstate, Liberty Mutual, they're going to pay on behalf of the negligent party. With the defamation case, that is not always or ever the case because there is typically, unless there's some type of homeowner's insurance policy behind it, there's typically not going to be an insurance policy that will step in and pay a $500,000 million, $10 million verdict. So you're essentially left to collect against the defendant. That's another reason why these cases are so difficult to find an attorney, and why Dave is special. But is that kind of the same in Texas in your experience? Like, hey, I have to first research. I mean, even let's just assume that you were defamed and I can prove the damages. How am I going to collect?
I think that is exactly right. And your listeners are better for hearing it from you. I mean, in any case, not just defamation, but you have to have the what I call the holy trinity, right? You got to have liability, damages, and collectability. If you don't have, and collectability is so important. The old saying of trial lawyers is that, a judgment's not worth the paper it's written on if you can't collect on it. And that's what it is. And when you go defamation cases, like in any case that we look at, but defamation cases in particular, is that you're rarely going to have any sort of insurance dollars. You hit the nail on the head. Sometimes you could find it in a homeowner's policy, but the Moldavans in this case were renters. And I'll tell you, we looked at that from the very beginning. And Andrew was eyes wide open about the fact that although Andrew and Neely Moldavan did not have much, we knew that one of their parents was very wealthy. And you can't go after the assets of a parent. But her decision was, I can do nothing and let my name be smeared, or I can go forward and vindicate my name and hope that if a jury finds our way, or actually in the hope that we didn't get to the jury, that daddy would cut that check to make it go away. But knowing that he didn't have to, and we couldn't, it's not like we'd go after dad's assets. What dad did was fund multiple legal teams instead to fight me for 2.5 years, and at every step along the way, up on appeal, back down, and all the way through trial, and rather than just pay Andrea to try to help her put her life together. But ultimately they paid.
That's the rainbow at the end of the storm, I guess, so to speak. So in the last few minutes, Dave, thank you for that. In the last few minutes, what are some of the things that, not just wedding photographers, but any wedding professional out there, what are some of the things that we can learn from this case and tell them moving forward, like, hey, this is some things that you can do to prevent this, or if it's even possible?
Well, number one, I would say, see people like yourself and just get your basic contractual documents. Get your contract and your documents done one time by a lawyer, and then you have those in place, because where there's inconsistencies or where it's not as clear as you'd like it. And look, I'll be candid with Andrea's contract. Well, there was some issues with how clear it was, right? In the totality of everything, they made it, it was clear that they had been communicated the information and they were choosing to do something bad for other reasons. But the point would be is spending a little bit of money on the front end by hiring a good lawyer like yourself, or a lot of good lawyers out there, to just get your contracts tight in place to protect you. That's number one, and number two is, communication. Not that Andrea could have done differently, because she tried to offer the pictures offer the cover for free, but I feel like there's so much breakdown in communication, and it sends people behind the keyboard to do, to be the keyboard tiger and to lash out. Whereas maybe if you communicated, you get in a dispute over a few $100, and I hear all the time, and now that's escalated into something that's going to cost everybody far more. And if you communicate on the front end, tell me what your problem is, tell me what the issue is, meet in the middle, compromise. It's better to compromise on the front end than all of the fallout that comes on the back end.
Agreed. That's exactly right. So at the end of the day, like Dave said, is number one, make sure that, and this is what I preach every week on this podcast, is that every within the wedding industry, every profession is different. So a wedding videographer contract will have concepts and terms that are going to be different than a planner. Even within planners are different than coordinators. And then even more importantly, within that particular subset, planner A does things different than planner B based on their conduct, their attitudes, how they hold themselves. And I've seen over the thousands of contracts that I've drafted that you specifically as a wedding planner, based on how you carry yourself, you might be more liable for a particular type of claim that another person is not. So having contracts that are directly specific to you as a profession, and then with you as a person, is important. But also important is the words, what can I do to make it right? So communicating and trying to resolve the issues at the outset is the best thing. So Dave, thank you so much. And again, there are not many, this is for all the listeners out there, there are not many attorneys that that are trial attorneys. Okay. So just imagine maybe 1% of every attorney that you've ever met in your life has tried a case. Within that 1%, probably less than 1% have a verdict that's $1 million or more. Okay. So I want to just again say thank you so much, Dave, because you are in an echelon of attorneys that, people might not realize that, but that's a special thing. And we appreciate you doing that. And we especially appreciate you fighting on behalf of wedding professionals. It's fantastic.
You gave me goosebumps. Thank you for saying such nice words about me. And, this one, we came out on the right side of things. And, hopefully the next time you talk to me, it's about another case where I came out on the right side of things.
There it is. All right. Thank you, Dave. I felt like, trial lawyer coming on the show, I had to put my suit on. So this is like one of the rare times where I put a suit jacket on, not my tie, just a suit jacket, out of respect for the verdict in this case. If you are enjoying the content of the Wedding Industry Law podcast, then by all means, please like and subscribe, leave a comment, leave a review. I don't even know how to do that. I think they make it hard to do reviews. I don't know why that is. I feel like it should be like click a button to review a podcast, but it's not like that, at least as of right now, or maybe I'm just too dumb to do that. But at any rate, you're smart and you could figure it out. And if you could, please do so. Also, like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Subscribe, leave a comment below. I am always looking for ideas for content for the episode. So if you've got something that is burning your toes, that is grinding your gears, and you want someone to talk about it, maybe I'm your man to do that. So leave a comment. Let me know what you want to hear about. And with that, we'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Wedding Industry Law Podcast. This podcast is intended for general information only. Nothing in this podcast is intended to be legal advice. Do not rely on this podcast for your legal matter. Instead, consult an attorney in your area. Thanks, obrigada, até semana que vem.